Status quo where our province is being treated unfairly by a federal government for close to a decade now, supported every step. You saw in this most recent federal election was 65% of Saskatchewan people didn't vote for that status quo either, Mr. Speaker. But it is not a straw man argument where it's status quo or separation. We don't like either of those. We think there is an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, and we truly believe and always have believed there is right to the founding principles of this party, that there is an opportunity for Saskatchewan to continue to grow and prosper in its economy, to grow its population, grow our communities, reinvest back into those communities.
Saskatchewan has officially announced its separation from Canada after years of being sidelined by Ottawa.
It's not just Alberta. Saskatchewan's upset. Quebec is upset. I think that you'll hear from other provinces there also.
While prairie anger explodes, First Nations warn of major treaty violations, and underground defense units are quietly preparing.
So, those feelings of alienation, anger, they shouldn't be discounted in any way. Those are Canadians.
What started as frustration is now a full-blown rebellion, and the rest of Canada wasn't ready for this.
I think you'd see those feelings of alienation wane.
Saskatchewan has always been Canada's quiet, hard-working middle child, the province that tilled the land, fueled the economy, and politely smiled while Ottawa played favorites with the bigger kids. You think people forgot about that? Nope. They've been holding it in, and now they're done playing nice.
Various constituents are telling them and talking to them about the frustration and really what I call the alienation that, far too many people in Saskatchewan as well as other parts of Canada are.
This isn't just anger bubbling up. It's full-blown exhaustion. Years of carbon taxes shoved down their throats, resources hijacked by bureaucrats who wouldn't last a day on a Saskatchewan oil rig, and policies designed in glass towers by people who think agriculture is an app. And now Saskatchewan is finally screaming enough to
chart a path forward that is good for Saskatchewan, but also good for Saskatchewan within the nation.
And it's not just barstool rants or backyard mutterings anymore. It's organized, it's real, it's loud. In 2020, the Buffalo Party charged onto the scene like a political bull, not with suits and donors, but with Facebook groups, church basement meetings, and pure grassroots fire. They didn't win seats, but they won something bigger: momentum. Over 2.5% of the vote, beating Liberals in multiple ridings. That's not fringe, that's a warning shot.
Saw in this most recent federal election was 65% of Saskatchewan people didn't vote for that status quo either, Mr. Speaker. But it is not a straw man argument where it's status quo or separation. We don't like either of those. We think there is an opportunity.
And by 2022, that warning shot turned into legislation. Enter the Saskatchewan First Act, which, let's be honest, is just the province legally telling Ottawa to back the hell off. On paper, it's about controlling natural resources. In reality, it's a bold legislative middle finger. Internal legal debates even broke out asking whether federal agents should be allowed on provincial project sites. Think about that. They're actually discussing how to block the feds from stepping foot on Saskatchewan soil.
I actually think it's alienation that many Canadians are feeling. And so if you're asking, are there caucus members that are, feeling frustrated with respect to the...
Meanwhile, secret documents started leaking. Private caucus conversations where MLAs said, and I quote, "If Alberta ever jumps, we better be ready." That's not some online meme or Reddit fantasy. That's elected officials planning their escape route. And Premier Scott Moe, he's not leading the charge, but he's leaving the door wide open. He said it himself. If the people want a referendum, he's not standing in the way. Translation, he's handing Saskatchewan the keys to the getaway truck. These are all responsive feelings that Saskatchewan residents have. And so,
these are all responsive feelings that Saskatchewan residents have. And so, with respect to, feeling some of that frustration, I would hope that our caucus, being a governing caucus, is large enough that it's reflective of the communities that they...
Let's talk numbers, because this isn't just emotional venting, it's statistically terrifying for Ottawa. As of early 2024, 34% of the province wants a vote on independence. That's already huge, but get this, among young voters it's 42%. The generation that's supposed to carry the future of this country is eyeing the door. And if Ottawa blocks just one more resource project, polls say, support could jump over 50%. That's majority territory. That's referendum ready.
Sure, there's people that, yes, absolutely want to separate from Canada. I think you could narrow that down to largely being frustrated. I'm frustrated with the unconsulted decisions that have come from Ottawa for the last period of time.
And yet, while all this is happening, You've got Mark Carney, Canada's economic mascot, crawling out of whatever elite conference he was attending to tell Saskatchewan that separation is economically irrational. Oh, please. Mark Carney is the last person Saskatchewan needs to hear from. This is the guy who bored the UK to death at the Bank of England, bombed out of political relevancy in Canada, and now suddenly wants to play savior of the Confederation. Federal government, and I think that's the same with respect to the anger and frustration that many Saskatchewan folks are feeling. And it's not just in Saskatchewan, it's in many other areas of Canada as well. And so it's incumbent on us to chart a path forward, that is in, I say, the best interest of Saskatchewan residents. Let's break it down. Carney's best ideas involve spreadsheets, elite panels, and lecturing regular folks from a podium. He talks about instability like he's not the same guy who once backed a carbon tax that gut-punched Western provinces. Mark, buddy, Saskatchewan doesn't need your TED Talk, it needs autonomy. And maybe if you'd spent more time in a tractor than on a Bloomberg podcast, you'd get it. Use the examples BC 69, the unconsulted introduction years ago of the carbon tax going to $50, never go higher. Then, very shortly after, it's going to go to $170 and musing about even higher than that. Anyway, the real reason Saskatchewan is fed up isn't theoretical, it's economic. The province isn't just sitting on golden soil, it's powering the nation. Potash, uranium, wheat, oil, all flowing through systems controlled by, you guessed it, federal institutions. The minute Saskatchewan says, we're out, that entire supply chain gets a headache. It's incumbent on us to chart a path forward that is in, I say, the best interest of Saskatchewan residents, but also certainly the best interest of our province within the Confederation, and they know it. That's why quiet meetings are happening in Calgary boardrooms. Emails from Montana, energy think tanks in Texas reportedly drafting plans for a Western Economic Compact. Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Interior BC, a 4-province trade alliance. Imagine that, a Western bloc tied to American energy investors, bypassing Ottawa altogether. Who needs the maple leaf when you've got Texas oil money and trade? Deals south of the border. The ND party in Alberta, separate from their parent party, the federal party. And so it's a fair question for these folks here. Are you going to stay, or are you going to go? Just a quick reminder, 86% of you watch, but don't subscribe. Hit that button and support the channel. It's quick, easy, and means the world. Now let's not pretend this is all opportunity. There's risk too, and it's already happening. Saskatchewan is bleeding talent. Since 2022, thousands of young professionals have ditched the province for Alberta or the US. Why? Because while the politicians dither, people want stability. They want careers. They want certainty. And until Saskatchewan figures out its future, that talent is going to keep walking. An Angus poll survey showed that if the Liberals were to win the election, a third of Saskatchewan people would vote to leave the Federation. The Sask Jobs Report of 2024 laid it out plain. If this instability keeps going, the province is looking at an 18% drop in skilled labor retention by 2026. That's not just stats, that's a crisis. Farm operators, tech startups, nurses, welders, all packing up because Ottawa can't stop choking the West with red tape and green fantasies. A lot of it is the frustration with the federal government. That's more a feeling of alienation, more a feeling of just not agreeing with the policies and the direction of the federal government. Online, the story is exploding. Creators, influencers, and citizen journalists are doing what legacy media won't, talking about it, posting about it, blowing it up. Because guess what? When your province is on the verge of independence and your media gives you 30 seconds, you turn to TikTok and people are listening. Strong provincial and regional voices in federal cabinet, in federal policy making, that can be an issue. For the last Trudeau Liberal government, there was, there was no representation from Saskatchewan because all the MPs were. Meanwhile, what's Ottawa doing? Preparing talking points, running war room simulations, acting like they didn't just ignore this province for decades. Now they're scrambling, watching the numbers climb, and realizing too late that Saskatchewan isn't bluffing anymore. So yeah, if the barnyards are starting to sound more revolutionary than Parliament Hill, maybe it's because Saskatchewan's tired of pulling the plow while being told to shut up and pay their carbon taxes. And now, with legal frameworks, polling data, economic blueprints, and even military prep quietly surfacing, it's not if anymore. We don't have a national plan for our export commodities regardless of whether we're talking about canola or wheat or steel or what. If we don't have a plan to get our commodities out to the market and out to the rest of the world, it's when. Now let's talk about the giant legal elephant in the room, the land. You know, the one Saskatchewan is trying to walk out of Canada with like it's their cousin's cooler at a family BBQ. Here's the problem. They might not even own it. That's right, treaty leaders across the province are standing up and saying, hold on, this land isn't even yours to take. And they're not just tweeting about it, they're lawyering up, because technically, legally, and morally, a massive chunk of Saskatchewan is treaty land. Land with protections not just under Canadian law, but international law. This isn't a neighborly dispute about fences, this is 30% or more of the province sitting under contested treaty agreements. That's nearly a third of the land being flagged as not yours, buddy. Particularly in Saskatchewan and Alberta, with some frustrated with what they view as out-of-touch policies around energy and the environment created in Ottawa. These policies don't benefit the West, and First Nations aren't just waiting for the next political stunt. Some have already gone international, reaching out to the UN and even the International Court of Justice, putting Canada on the global stage for a showdown. Imagine Ottawa trying to explain this mess to Geneva. Yeah, so our provinces are rebelling, and yes, the treaties, we're still working on that. Now, if Saskatchewan or Alberta were simply to declare themselves independent states, and other states were to recognize them as independent states, and the government of Canada ceased to have any control over Saskatchewan and Alberta, it may be that de facto they would become independent. Meanwhile, a Regina law firm quietly dropped a truth bomb. Any real move towards secession will trigger an avalanche of land claims. We're talking litigation so big it makes Alberta's oil sands look like a sandbox. And once that landslide starts, the whole independence, a train could derail before it even leaves the station. You can't found a nation on land you don't legally control unless, of course, you're running a Netflix special called How to Get Sued by Literally Everyone. So, the pathway is there to bring the temperature down, but the question will be whether there's a will and a partner in the federal government after we see the vote on April the 28th. You mean irrational like carbon pricing that crushes rural economies? Or maybe irrational like sending billions in federal funding to Ontario while gutting the West? Mark Carney is the guy who tanked credibility at the Bank of England, showed up in Canada like a budget Macron, and now wants to lecture people who actually produce something. Let's be honest, the closest Mark Carney has ever been to Saskatchewan was probably during a flyover on his way to a G7 cocktail party. But there is an opportunity for Saskatchewan to continue, to grow and prosper in its economy, to grow its population, grow our communities, and reinvest back into those communities, all within a strong united nation of Canada. Yeah, his biggest concern? Market instability. Wow, Mark, thanks for the tip. What he doesn't mention is that the instability came from Ottawa, not from the prairie towns being choked by policies they had zero say in. He thinks Saskatchewan is Quebec 2.0, cute, emotional, and dramatic. But, newsflash, Mark, Saskatchewan isn't bringing maple syrup to the gunfight. They're bringing oil, uranium, and a decade of pent-up political rage. If Saskatchewan really breaks away, do you think others will follow? Let us know below. And hey, don't forget to subscribe for the next chapter in this wild Canadian saga.